Hey everyone, and welcome to part 9 of our top 50 movies of the 2010s. This will be the final part. Our entire top 10 will be revealed in this supersized episode. Plus, stick around at the end, because after all the number ones are revealed, I'll be back with some statistics, if I can say that properly. I'll have some stats, some raw stats that I find interesting. Maybe you'll find interesting too. But without further ado, let us get into our number 10.
Here we go. This is my 10. This is probably the easiest of the list to do. I knew which ones I wanted. I was just putting them in some order. And so we're going to lead this off. This is a big pick. This is the only other 2019 movie I have on my list. And it's one I've seen numerous times now because my wife's obsessed. This is Avengers Endgame. What a fitting finale for a, what was this, 22, 23 movies?
I think this was 21, and then Spider-Man
21?
Far From Home was 22.
Okay. So 21 movies counting, and it not that it makes everyone feel like they were necessary, because talking to you, Doctor Strange, but it does, and it's, despite being a sequel to all of them and to Infinity War, it weirdly can stand by itself with the storytelling choices that it makes, and just it's full of some of my favorite moments of all of this last year. And every time I've seen it, it makes me just as emotional, gives me the goosebumps. You know, yeah, there's some storytelling flaws, but when it hits, I don't care about all those. It makes me instantly forget. You know, there's a scene where you get the on your left line, and it fills me with so much joy. Unlike unlike some other movies and other franchises that I wish had that same feeling. You know, and going into this, I'm not that much of a Marvel fan. Like, yeah, I love Thor. I have a newfound respect for Spider-Man, but yeah, and Endgame just is that movie, and they did the impossible. They stuck the landing, in times where a lot of movies have a hard time doing that. I feel that it gave each of those characters a fitting ending, and it also made it that now I don't have to see these movies on opening night, because we're done. We got these. We can see it during the weekend. We don't have to be there because that chapter's closed. But yeah, Endgame, very, very good movie.
My number 10 is Kubo and the Two Strings. This is the stop motion animated movie from a few years back now, maybe 2018. I'm not sure without check off the top of my head. But this is a story about a young boy and has a musical adventure across the world. It's got so much heart, a lot of characters that he meets along the way, a lot of ties to family and friends and such as he goes through it. It's just this wonderful adventure, and it's gorgeously animated. There's the scene where he's crossing the sea on a boat, and this this stop motion animation, it just looks incredible. It's next level animation work.
All right, my number 10 is a little movie that I'm actually surprised it's on here and how much I liked it, because I like the director, I like the book, but it seemed like a hard one to film, and that would be Doctor Sleep. I was really, really surprised that they were able to pull off a movie that, you know, serves as both a great adaptation of the book, but also, you know, like a sequel to the original Shining movie, which, yeah, I feel like, you know, even if people think that, you know, it didn't really succeed in that part, I feel like you got to give it credit for, you know, like how it was able to kind of marry, you know, both the, you know, the books and, you know, the original movie, which is kind of a daunting task. But, you know, Flanagan, I think is a great director. We mentioned on the show before, it seems like he's someone that just keep liking his stuff more and more. Yeah, he just did such a good job. It, you know, feels big and epic, but it might not be what you'd expect from a Shining sequel when you're dealing with like psychic vampires and stuff. But I thought it was really well handled. I think the Blu-ray should be coming out soon. I can't wait to watch it and watch that 3.5 hour director's cut.
Oh God. Maybe it was too long, Tim. That's just get that right there. There's like there's like 20 minutes at the start you could easily cut, and just like that's it. There you go. Get straight into the story.
Well, you can cut those and send them right to me. 'Cause I-
Woo! Top 10s. Okay. Number 10 is Mad Max Fury Road.
Whoa, yes, baby. I love it.
Yeah, big one. Mediocre. No, far from. It is a movie that says, you know what? Maybe we were a little bit ageist when it came to George Miller. Give him all the money he wants to make whatever movie he wants, because this was so special. I think it won Comic-Con the year that the trailer came out, and it was just so nice to have a movie with such great stunt work and in a world that's not just about superheroes. Really simple story, just breathtaking, like cinematography, and yeah, the stunt work alone, it's just so incredible.
It's wonderful.
Really, really special film.
It is a wonderful experience, and I think it's interesting that, like, this and the Apes trilogy, and one other film I suspect will be popping up in your top 10, like, are examples of, like, oh, sometimes when you do bring a franchise back and reboot, it actually ends up being, like, justified, but also better. Because The Road Warrior is a fantastic movie, and there's a reason why that inspired an entire decade of Italian knockoffs, because it did, right? But I think Fury Road's even better. Like, Fury Road's an even better movie.
Fury Road is the best of all of them, yeah.
Yeah. That said, I've not seen Beyond Thunderdome. I still have to see Mad Max 3. So
I think I've seen it on TV.
Whenever we get around to them.
I remember Tina Turner. She's in it, right?
Yes, she's in it.
I don't remember her in anything else, so I've had to have seen that.
Yes. The first one I remember being a really weird movie. It wasn't what I was expecting. It's not what you think of when you think of Mad Max.
Super independent,
Yeah.
like really low budget. It's just a guy on a bike, and they say it's the apocalypse, but things seem to be pretty normal.
It's also very Australian. Everyone's got an Australian accent. My number 10 is Mad Max Fury Road, which has been a pretty regular occurrence on these top 50s. It's what else is there to say at this point? But it's elegantly simple. And elegance maybe not the word you think of when you think of Mad Max Fury Road. You think of rowdy and raucous and loud noises and engines and dust clouds and what a glorious day and all that jazz. But ultimately, it is very simple. It is a car chase. It's a car chase pretty much the entire time. And it's about real stunts, if that makes sense, as opposed to fake stunts.
Yeah, it's not all CG. It's cars and doing shit.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's enhanced by the CG, but
yeah.
Do you know what's so frustrating about my top 10 is that so many of these that have popped up at least a few times before, and I have almost nothing left to add about any of them. Mad Max Fury Road being the culprit. I believe I am the 5th person of 5 to have this on the list. It's chasing and action and things, and Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron making a lot of grilly faces at each other, and downright, actually, do you know what no one's mentioned about this movie so far is just how downright vile the villain is. He's absolutely disgusting in the most steampunk looking way. He is the worst of the worst. He is Donald Trump with a gas mask, and that's pretty much him. He's not really much different. So
you can't argue with that.
Number 9, another Disney property, but I'll be the different one. So Star Wars: The Force Awakens. You know, I tried not to, but there's a palpable energy the night I went and saw this. It's my favorite of the Star Wars since it's come back. J.J. Abrams doing, his best, I guess. I don't want to say J.J. Abrams, but I do feel it's some of his strongest filmmaking, even with the latest one thrown in there. But, man, it does a lot, and it does it well. It introduces new characters. It plays with the old characters. Made me fall in love with Star Wars again. And that's, something that IAP was talking about Marvel fatigue on the last one. I'm feeling the Star Wars fatigue. As great as The Mandalorian is and whatnot, I'm kind of ready to pump my brakes here. But Force Awakens, brought that love back, and I'm thankful for that. And it's a really solid movie. Again, rewatchability. I watch this, I feel, at least once a year. It's whether it's on TV or if my wife weirdly wants to watch it, which is strange, but she loves BB-8, so I get that. But yeah, Force Awakens. Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron. Love that character. The fact that he wasn't supposed to make it out into the second act, yet JJ liked working with him so much. I think that's a testament to his abilities. And what it did with restructuring Star Wars with Rey and Kylo Ren and Adam Driver just doing his stuff there. Like seeing him on screen and then seeing the actor he's become since it's weird. You know, like I watched Marriage Story over the weekend and I can't not hear Kylo Ren's voice because it's just Adam Driver's voice. But that's how iconic he is in that role. And you know, I didn't want to put it this high, but I couldn't help myself. But yeah, Force Awakens is number 9.
No comment.
My number 9 is The Death of Stalin. This is a comedy film from Armando Iannucci, behind Thick of It, Veep, and the recent Avenue 5 that just started. This was his second movie. The first was the spin-off of The Thick of It, so that kind of felt more in like that. This was the first like original thing that he'd done. And it is, as the name suggests, about the death of Stalin and the immediate aftermath of the reactions to all the people around him. And that sounds like it shouldn't be as funny as it is, but it is constantly hilarious. It's a little bit jarring to hear everyone just using their own accents. That no one's, they're not all putting on Russian accents. So there's a hodgepodge mix of various things going on. But you get used to that. And the reason that they did that is they didn't want the accents to distract from the jokes. And I can appreciate that because they are very, very funny jokes. Constantly funny. As a comedy, that's pretty much the highest praise you can give.
My number 9 is Angel's favorite song.
Mandy, you came and
Yes, Mandy, the wonderful movie directed by a man whose name I'm not going to be able to remember. Was it Cosmatos? Is that his?
Yes, Cosmatos is his last name. Yeah.
Very cool name. And then Mandy's like crazy Nick Cage being crazy Nick Cage. But like also the it's so vibrant, really cool direction. It just it's a bit of a slow burn in cases, but once it like kicks into like this like epic heavy metal like music video kind of like shades, it's really cool and surreal, and just a visual treat with some really cool like horror action and stuff. It's another one's like a little hard to describe, but
I mean,
really worth checking out.
If you ever saw Hellraiser and thought to yourself, I want to see these Cenobites on motorbikes.
Yeah.
That's you get that in Mandy and Tigers and Custom Axes and Bill Duke from Predator.
And of course just like it's Nick Cage being crazy, but not in a just undeserved cheesy way of like, oh, why is he doing this? It's like, oh no, like there is a reason for him like getting angry and going crazy and everything, and just him just in his underwear covered in blood screaming. You can watch it all day
on Camp Crystal Lake, no less.
Very cool. If you haven't checked it out, definitely go ahead. And great music and everything too, and just really hauntingly beautiful.
Number 9, I have a horror movie. It is Evil Dead.
Oh yeah, Tara.
I
get it
love
in.
This movie.
Evil Dead's great. I love Evil Dead 2013.
I know. Oh my god. I dragged my friend who didn't like horror movies to go see this. They were like, okay, I'll go see it because I know you really want to see it. So, and I felt so bad because it was probably the scariest film that I had ever seen, and I like scary films, but I genuinely had trouble sleeping. I think the fact that this didn't even get like nominated for best makeup is mind-blowing. Like maybe they just don't. I don't know how it works.
There's a stigma with horror films in the Academy. They don't like them.
Definitely the best makeup I've ever seen in like a horror film.
It was great.
Or in the movie. Just so gross and like eerie, and So much blood.
I
and
love.
and it even gets a little bit like, I don't want to say goofy, but like there's a hint of camp in there where you're just like, oh yeah, this is Evil Dead. But it just gets the horror so right. I love this film.
It's very extreme. The violence goes like above and beyond anything the original films did in terms of just raw, visceral, like grungy gore. I love the ending. I love that it flips things on its head versus the original, and the last like 15-20 minutes are like amazing.
Solid.
I love it.
So much blood.
So much blood. So much blood. And Jane Levi is great in it. This was the movie that kind of introduced me to her, and I ended up watching Suburgatory just because it was her. I was like, I want to see more stuff with Jane Levi in it, and it was a decent little sitcom. But she went on to be in Don't Breathe, and she was in season 1 of Castle Rock. She's become quite the modern day scream queen.
Don't Breathe was on my list too. I had to knock it off, but I wanted to include it because that also was really good. Yeah, but Evil Dead, I'll admit I have like a hard time rewatching it because I know it's so scary. I mean, I had a hard time like looking in mirrors after for a while because what if something with yellow eyes is looking back at me?
I mean, I have to admit, I didn't necessarily find it scary because I don't really find any movie scary.
Oh my god, it's so scary.
No movie's ever given me nightmares, and I'm not trying to brag when I say that. I just genuinely don't feel that from movies. But I'm glad it had that effect. I'm glad it had that effect.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
For whatever reason, I think now that you've said it, I remembered you telling me you liked this, but I'd forgotten that, so I was genuinely surprised with this pick.
I love this movie.
So yeah, Evil Dead 2013 is good. I'm actually kind of pissed we didn't get a sequel with Jane Levi like continuing on, but hey ho.
Sure, we won't get her Army of Darkness, I guess, but that's all right. Like I think it's a pretty tight film on its own.
Yeah, it doesn't need one. Yeah, it's got, it ends properly. It doesn't need a sequel, but part of me really wanted a sequel with the same director. Like, just like, what can they do next, kind of thing.
True.
So.
And was Don't Breathe the same director?
Yeah, Fede Alvarez. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same dude.
Also, really strong horror film. I really like that one.
Yeah.
Again, like it was right at the edge of my list, and I had to.
Which also is very extreme, but not for gore reasons. Which is, I guess, why I still kind of want a sequel because
unsettling though.
Because I want to see him do more gore. I want the gore to keep going further. Is what I want.
Yeah, that turkey baster though.
Say no more. No spoilers. No spoilers.
That and the blue suit is going to stick with me for the decade.
My number 9 is The Cabin in the Woods. This is the film by Drew Goddard, co-written with Joss Whedon, who you might know from the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This is the ultra-meta horror film, the satire, what I would argue does Scream better than Scream, and it deconstructs the horror genre in a loving way. I mean, it is cynical, but it's also very loving. It's clear that these two guys writing this script know their horror movies. There's tons packed in here. I mean, obviously they don't have the actual licenses to use certain things, but there's clearly the Pinhead. There's clearly the Michael Myers-esque character. There's clearly this. There's clearly that.
Enough that you get what it's doing.
And what's so great about this is that it's like relentlessly funny. Like, most of my favorite comedies tend to be things that are mixed with other genres, and this is kind of a good example of that. But this movie is absolutely, and maybe it's because it's it's playing on tropes that I'm familiar with because I'm a horror fan. But Jenkins and Whitford in the control room and all this stuff, and I'm kind of glossing over the premise because I know it's been brought up already. But it's this just a love letter to the horror genre, but at the same time a kick in the arse to say no. Do something different. Don't keep doing the same things. But at the same time, it's full of all these things. And I remember just being like surprised. I had no idea there was going to be a Sigourney Weaver cameo, and I just hearing her voice going, that sounds familiar. Who's this? And then out she walked. I was like, oh, Sigourney Weaver's in that. How did they get her for this little low budget weird movie that was shelved for like 2 years after it was finished? And and I got mad at when it was Lionsgate at the time. I was like, what the hell? Why did you make me wait 2 extra years for this, you bastards? Like, it's great.
Yeah, usually when films get shelved, that's a bad sign. But this is a great example of why it's not always a bad movie when they do this.
Oh yeah, this and Jason X, the 2 prime examples of movies that were shelved and came out and were complete and utter gold. I say that half jokingly, but Uh, no, and I think I love the escalation of this movie. I love that the first half is just really, it's a really good build, but it's just really funny. Like, you're just kind of into the absurdness of what the plot is and how endearing the characters are, especially the ones behind the scenes, if you will. But the third act takes everything it's set up, and like, you know, it could have easily blue balls. There's so many movies, like there's so many like horror movies especially that I watch now for Screams After Midnight with Tim, and I'll get to like the end of the movie and I'll go, there was kind of a good idea in there somewhere in the first half, but like the movie never paid off on it, had no interest in actually delivering what it set up or even exploring the one little nugget of an idea it really had. This movie gives you everything you think you might want from this movie. It gives it all of it to you, all of it. That third act is just a barrage of everything you could possibly imagine them doing with the concept, and it feels so fulfilling, and it makes other movies look limp in comparison. Cabin in the Woods is phenomenal.
Number 8 is a movie that, not that I forgot about because it's a real strong movie, but it's one that's a little bit smaller. Chef, Jon Favreau. And it was kind of his response to the studio system, in that he plays a chef that gets fed up by being told what to do by a restaurateur that's not there, not getting his hands dirty. So he decides to go into business for himself with the help of his son, who he reconnects with, and starts a Cuban sandwich food truck. And they go across country together and you know, learn about being family from one another. And it's a whole lot of fun. It's Favreau working his best, and as much as I like his other bigger, you know, projects, there's something nice about this small little movie about a father and son reconnecting. And it's got a pretty decent supporting cast. Scarlett Johansson shows up, and Sofia Vergara plays his ex-wife, which, of course, when you're Jon Favreau and you're writing a movie, you make Sofia Vergara your ex-wife, because why not?
Isn't Scarlett Johansson his like new girlfriend as well?
Kind of, yeah, a little bit at the beginning. So yeah, of course that's what you do. But it's just a real touching story, and I like Favs a lot. And it's weird that this felt like his response to the Marvel stuff and Iron Man 2. Yet he goes right back to work for Disney after this with the Jungle Book and Lion King, and now he's working on the Mandalorian, and you know. Who else knows what he has up his sleeve? But I hope there's more of Chef. And if you haven't seen it, please check that out. It's fantastic.
My number 8 is The Shape of Water. I love this movie, and screw you, just because you didn't like it that much.
Overrated shite.
Clearly not. It's at number 8, so clearly up. I'm sure someone else must have had it on their list. Maybe.
The only notable thing here is that the Academy apologized this year by giving a good film Best Picture. After several years.
I'm sorry, this was also a great pick.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Look, I'm not saying that the Academy didn't get it right this year. They obviously did. And I'm not saying that maybe that movie's not better. But I love this movie. This movie is great. And I will not have it reduced to just the fish screwing movie.
Look, it's like, I'm not going to judge if you're into a bit of fish fondling. That's your business. That's your business. As long as the fish is consenting, I have no problem with the.
The point is, it's a gorgeous movie to watch. Yeah, it's you know, this washed out, faded colors that should be unappealing, but they make it work. Great set design, a gorgeous score. It's such a good movie, and you're just dead inside.
My number 8, so another horror movie that, you know, has really stuck with me, and I actually just ordered the book, and I'm looking forward to reading that. That would be The Ritual. This is kind of a surprising one that just seemed to like drop on Netflix one weekend, and then, you know, we're gonna do it for the show. I think it was getting like a little bit of buzz, but it really like struck a chord with me. You know, there's nothing crazy about the plot. You know, essentially it's you know, group of friends. They're on a, you know, kind of like backpacking trip. they take I think it was like on maybe like the anniversary of their friend's death, who was like killed in a convenience store, and essentially they get lost in the woods.
Oh,
in
a convenience store robbery. That sounded really weird to me.
Right,
They were killing a convenience store. Man, convenience stores are brutal in England.
They're dangerous.
You might not come out alive.
And I forget, is this like in I don't know if you remember, like, was it like Scandinavia or something? Or...
yeah, where they go to spread the ashes. Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah.
And so essentially they get lost in the woods, and then they kind of come across creepy occult like things, and I'll leave the story at that. But I just really like the tone that it sets. It does like some really cool imagery stuff, and like where it kind of like harkens back to that robbery early on in the movie, because it does feel like a weird way to start the movie, but then by the end it's totally justified the way they kind of incorporate elements of it again. And then I will say, like, there's some without giving away too much, like let's just say maybe there's like some like creature stuff that I just absolutely love the design for. I feel like it's like just a really weird, bizarre like creature that I feel like people always describe Lovecraft as having these weird kind of unimaginable creatures, but then whenever they do it in movies, it just kind of like looks like a generic tentacle thing. Which is like and I think this like has a creature design in it that's just so like not what you would expect, and like it just looks like so off and like different than what I've seen before. I just really, really loved it. And it's something that has really stuck with me that I keep thinking about. So yeah, The Ritual. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's been on Netflix like forever, so it's probably still on there.
Number 8, not a surprise if you know me, it's Blade Runner 2041, excuse me, 2041.
That's not right either.
2049. I don't know what's going on with me. It's too late. I'm sick.
2049. I don't know what 2041 is. That is 2041.
I'm sure it's something. Whatever. So Blade Runner 2049. Director Denis Villeneuve is a stranger to my list here. I think he's probably the biggest, second biggest director that I discovered in this time. And just so impressed by it, especially because if you listen to the Ace, I'm not a big fan of Blade Runner. The original one, I find it kind of boring, and it's a cool world, but doesn't live up to its premise or how great the world is. The story isn't enough, or the characters aren't enough for me to like the movie even. The
visuals are great, the sound is great, the music is great, but
this one
stories,
this world is given to a director who really knows how to play with the toys in it. Like he gets that, okay, this is a concept we can really talk about. It actually has very similar beats to Her. Like, what do we define as love with between a human and an android, or excuse me, what are they called?
Replicants.
Replicant. I was gonna say synthetics. Like, no, that's alien. Like a human and a replicant, or a replicant and like an AI, and it even has a very similar scene, but I don't care. Like, it's done so well, and I love all the set designs. There's like this really fantastic fight scene in Vegas, and like future Vegas desert. It really takes what the potential of this world could be for storytelling, and does it right, because it has a great director and writer involved. So yeah, really impressed by it. Love this movie.
My number 8, and this was not intentional, but my number 8 is 8th Grade. And this was a gem of a film that I saw, not last year now because we're on 2020, but 2018 movie. Is a coming of age story at a much more awkward age. I feel like there's some coming of age stories that are kind of junior high level, but for the most part they tend to be teenagers, right? It tends to be, either starting high school, the end of high school, those transitionary periods in a young person's life. This movie is about the end of junior high, and it's about the awkward girl who might be the most realistic portrayal of awkward adolescence that I have ever seen on film. Certainly the most relatable, and a really sort of negative way I've ever felt, where just her going into a party in this movie, a pool party. She's not really been. Her parents have kind of got her in there or whatever, and her just walking out in front of everyone and just knowing she's not going to talk to anyone because she knows what she's like. She knows enough about herself to know that this is not where she's comfortable.
Yeah.
And there's just this feeling of like uneasiness and dread the entire time. It does that great thing of emulating how it feels when you're 13 and everything feels like it's the end of the world. And it gives you to that, but not in a way that feels cheap. It feels authentic because it makes you think of your own adolescence. It makes you think of that. And the performance of Elsie Fisher in this movie is phenomenal. It's got a lot of heart. It tackles some big subjects, maybe even gets darker than you think it's going to, but it has a lot of great things to say. And I left this, when if you'd asked me at the start of the decade, or even just a couple of years ago, like, what do you think is going to be your top 10 in the decade? I would never have predicted the coming of age, 13-year-old, 14-year-old girl movie that didn't have any laser beams in it was going to be up there, or not. I mean, or even something that's really artsy fartsy. This is just a really well done sort of drama comedy. Emphasis on the drama more than I mean, it is funny in times. Don't get me wrong.
It's funny, but that's not the point of it.
Yeah, it's funny because life, when it's authentic, is funny, I guess is how I'd describe it. At least if you've got a sense of humor, is it? Anyway.
Number 7. Here's where we're going to start hitting these. Number 7 was a movie I never thought would have existed, and the fact that it does, I think, was a testament to the director and his skill in crafting such stories where all the characters, well, one might feel more important than the other. They all are important. They all have their moment to shine, and that is the Avengers. I remember seeing that movie in the theater that opening night, and Star Wars was palpable energy. Avengers was more of an uncertainty because at this point, this is the first time we're gonna have all these characters on screen together. With a guy from Firefly and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like, what is this life? And we nailed it. And there's certain character things that he laid the foundation for that would go on to be fleshed out in the other movies. But kind of, if it were to end with the Avengers, I think it's fitting. Like, he did such a good job. But yeah, also the last movie I saw before I got married, so it holds a special place. I could not have it in my top 10. It was just trying to find the spot for it. But yeah, it's that wraparound scene when it hit and the theater erupted into applause. Like, those are the moments I like going opening night to. And I feel we've gotten a little bit too used to them now, and people applauded every little thing in these movies. But that one was special.
My number 7 is The Favourite. This is a period drama with a twist because, well, one, it's more of a dark comedy than a drama.
How many fishes get screwed?
None. None. There is some weird use of fisheye lens though, which I've never seen a period drama use a fisheye lens to follow a horse, running across the screen. That was pretty unique. That's the closest link I can give you. But it is a surreal comedy. Very heavy emphasis on the surreal. This is the same director as The Lobster, whose name I'm not going to try and pronounce off the top of my head because I will butcher it. But it's out there. There is a
Lanthimos or something like that.
You're in the ballpark, I'm pretty sure.
I don't have it in front of me. I'm just trying to remember because I've seen The Lobster. That's the only movie of his I've seen. But continue.
Yeah. So there is a dance sequence which sounds like should be terrible. A period drama with a dance sequence, great. That's thrilling. It is incredible. It's the highlight of that movie for sure. In a movie with lots of very good moments, that dance is next level.
Yeah,
funny, surreal.
Is it better than Honey starring Jessica Alba?
Yes.
Just checking.
Number 7, that would be A Cabin in the Woods. Just such a cool, idea.
Hold on. A Cabin in the Woods, not The Cabin in the Woods.
No, that I don't like that one.
Okay, yeah, okay, different film. Okay, just checking.
But no, this is like such a cool idea for a horror movie. Did we do a review of it recently?
I mean, it was like 2 years ago now, but yeah, we did do a review of it, yes.
Okay, or maybe I'm just thinking about when we talked about it on our horror list then, because I feel like we had talked about it like, recently. But no, I mean, it's fantastic. Obviously another Joss Whedon thing, which we're both fans of.
The creator of the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes.
For the record.
Yeah, of course, for the record. But yeah, so I think most people know what it is, but if you don't know, essentially it's kind of plays out like a regular horror film where you have like these group of college kids who are going to spend some time at a cabin in the woods, and you get like the creepy gas station guy warning them not to go, and then they go and they're partying, and then whatever stuff is happening. But what sets it off, of course, is that as that's happening, the movie is also showing these people like kind of in this underground bunker who are orchestrating the events that are going on, making it play out like a horror movie. And it's just a great vehicle to explore all these different horror tropes, but at the same time having very interesting story narrative to play with that. And it delivers on everything you want. Like there's so much set up for these cool things that you're like, oh, man, I hope they come back to it. And then like the final third or so of the movie really delivers on that, to the point where it's like, oh man, like they could have easily saved like all this stuff like another movie or anything, but they go all out. And then they have like a pretty ballsy ending too, which it's kind of a shame, because I don't know if this is something where we would have ever seen a sequel or anything. I wonder if they'd ever think about doing a prequel. I mean, I don't know if you need more of it, but man, it is such a cool idea. There's definitely like other things I'm sure you could explore with it, but yeah, really awesome movie.
Number 7 is The Nice Guys.
Hey.
I freaking loved watching this film in the theater. I love sharing it with all of my friends. Like, watch this movie. It is, I wasn't really a big Ryan Gosling fan before.
Which is funny because your previous entry also starred Ryan Gosling.
Yeah, but I became a Ryan Gosling fan because of this film, which was, I think, the year before it. But yeah, Ryan Gosling and Maximus team up. It's there's a period that takes place in
Russell Crowe, for anyone playing at home who doesn't know who Maximus is from Gladiator.
Fat Maximus. Yeah, he's they team up. He's a private investigator. He's trying to find info on this girl. It leads to a bunch of shenanigans. Ryan Gosling is a terrible drunk father, but his daughter is so great.
Yeah,
she's so well written and smart and funny.
The daughter steals the show.
She's the one who's taking care of him, clearly.
Angry Rice, I think her name is, or something like that. Forgive me if I'm getting it slightly wrong. But she
was in the new Spider-Man film.
Yeah, she's great in this, and she steals the show.
She's forever on my list of must-watch because of this film. Definitely. The comedy works. I've watched this movie many, many times since it came out, and it's really just fun. And I so disappointed that the next movie that Shane Black did was The Predator, which was just not good. Coming off of The Nice Guys. What a shame.
So a couple of entries ago, Connor had Shape of Water, proving that he was a bit of a pervert. So here's a movie at my number 7 about being a pervert. This is called Shame. This is Michael Fassbender, who's a sex addict, and it is the story of him trying to overcome his sex addiction and the sort of the spiraling effect it has on the people around him. It is a heart-wrenching movie. It's a movie by Steve McQueen, who directed 12 Years a Slave and Widows and Hunger, and 2 of those also star Fassbender, funnily enough. And this is my favourite of his films. I think this movie is very hypnotic, and it does this really smart thing where it really kind of puts you on his head in the sense where it kind of comes in waves, and even the score does this, with the score, like all the main tracks of that score, which are all very good, do this thing where they kind of like come in with a sort of wall of noise and sort of fade out again, and there'll be silence. There's a lot of silenced gaps in the tracks. It sort of comes in like a pulse, but it's very spread out, and it kind of feels like his urge coming in and out of and all this stuff. But what's really great about it is that despite the fact that this is a movie clearly full of sex stuff, it's a hard R. Hell, it may have been in, probably NC-17 actually, but in the States. But like, it never once feels sexy. There's never a scene where you're going, oh, this is kind of hot, or this is kind of a turn on, or whatever. Like, the entire time, it feels like something he has to fulfill because he needs to do it, and not something that's ever once titillating to the audience. And it feels a little bit grimy, and a little bit, and I don't even want to say sleazy, because sleazy can even be appealing in the right context. If you're in the right mood for sleaze can appeal, but it doesn't. It never does in this movie. It is massively directed. The performance from Fassbender's great. There's some wonderfully sort of coalescing moments in the back half of the film. There's even some quiet moments that are really good. There's a scene where, to try and deal with his frustration, because he always needs to have sex, is he goes for a jog. He goes for a jog sometimes at night, and there's a shot in this movie, which I think is in New York, where they do a oneer, just following him jogging through the streets. And I presume they did this at like 2 or 3 in the morning when it was quiet. But he literally stops at the traffic lights and just sort of jogs on the spot every time he gets to, a set of lights that he has to stop at. And it's just this great shot. It's all from the side. It's kind of like the Old Boy oneer where it's just all from the side,
Sure.
But it's just him jogging. That's all it is. It's just this long jogging scene.
I assume it has a purpose in context of when you're watching it.
Yeah. It's at a point where he's trying to get it out of his head. He's trying desperately to focus on other things and have his energy go elsewhere. But it's it's such an impressive shot just because of how they did it. It's just this big oneer going through the streets of the city. It's it's hard not to be kind of enthralled by it.
Just on a sheer filmmaking level.
Yeah. So Shame is absolutely wonderful, and I'd highly recommend it, although not for kids. This is definitely one for the adults. As is Shape of Water, for the record. That's one for adults, because you can't be exposing children to filth like that.
Number 6, almost kind of the opposite of the Avengers. A little more quiet of a movie, and it's Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive. Only Nicholas Winding Refn movie I enjoy. I've tried the other ones. I even tried to watch his Viking one. Oof. Felt like I was on that ship forever with those guys in Valhalla Rising in one eye. But yeah, no, just Drive. I remember going to the theater and seeing it, and the scene in the elevator got so tense as he is stomping that dude to death. I didn't know what else to do but laugh. And my mother-in-law looked over at me like, "What is wrong with you?" And I was like, I don't know how else to react. And that's Gosling basically just emoting throughout the movie. He has very few lines of dialogue, yet you know exactly what he's thinking. You know the sense of his character. And it's got is it Carey Mulligan, right?
Yes.
As the love interest, and she's kind of this mousy woman that that's put in this predicament by her husband, played by Oscar Isaac, which is the first time I remember seeing him ever in a movie. He pops up in Star Wars. But yeah, just the way the movie's crafted, the score amps it that much up, and the villain, is Albert Brooks. What a menacing figure that you would never expect out of him. He makes Ron Perlman, look not as scary in comparison. So yeah, no, I love Drive, and it's weird. I shouldn't, because but I guess it is one of his most accessible movies.
My number 6. A couple of entries ago, I had Shape of Water, and you gave me some shit for that. So I'm going to make up for it here, because my number 6 is Parasite. And you gave me some shit by saying that this was better, and it is better.
Hold on a minute. When did you see Parasite, and when did we start this?
On the 1st of January. It was before I made this list.
Okay, I'm just checking.
It's fluctuated around the exact position, but since the first draft of my list, it's been in the top 10.
I'm just making sure you've not taken out something in your top 10 to slot this in. That's all I'm making sure.
I did take something out earlier on in the list, and I said that at the time, but that was after. This has been there the whole time.
Okay.
And honestly, this is one where it's only here because I've only seen it once, and maybe if I'd seen it some more, it might have moved up a bit. But everything else in the top 5 I've seen at least twice, and I know how it holds up and such. So I just want that there. Honestly, I don't really want to say anything more about Parasite because I don't want to say anything. Just go watch it blind as you can if you haven't already. I said near the start of our review that we did that I can't think of anything bad to say about it, and that stands true, which is why it's this high.
Yeah. Worth mentioning, I did not see Parasite until after I made my list, so Parasite will not be appearing on mine. It is not a statement on the quality of the film. It's purely, it was not seen before I did this. So, would it be on my top 50? Had I seen it? Very lately it would have been, but hey ho, we're beyond that.
We'll never know now, will we?
We're beyond that now.
So number 6, that would be Get Out. So I just mentioned Jordan Peele with Us. And his debut film Get Out. I think it was the trailers. I remember when it's coming out, like the trailers look cool, but like I think we are all kind of like, all right. I mean, Jordan Peele seems like a cool guy, but I don't know. Is he a horror guy? How is this going to turn out? And then the answer was it was amazing. It was really cool movie. And I just noticed I put 2 Bradley Whitford movies together. That was interesting.
It's the Bradley Whitford top 50. It's fine.
Yeah.
He's actually secretly in every single movie you've mentioned. Just in small roles. He's in the background. He's an extra in some scene. There's at least one movie you mentioned where he's just his hand creeping into the shot.
Of course.
He was the ass stubble for someone in another movie.
In Hellboy.
Yeah, he was there for the ass shot. Yeah.
But no, I mean, again, this is just another one that has like a really cool, interesting premise. Where, I guess maybe a little similar to kind of The Invitation, where someone is invited to somewhere and things are, and kind of getting this feelings of something's wrong and kind of uneasy, but you stick it out anyway, and then as everything starts to unfold, kind of spirals into this more and more interesting, sinister stuff. And then but what really hits home about it is just the unlike a lot of just generic Hollywood horror movies, is something that has something to say. There's a lot here about race and and everything that actually makes it interesting and gives it a voice and makes it feel unique. And not to mention, of course, just everything else on top of it, though, like great performances, great direction, music, and easily one of the best horror movies of the decade.
Number 6 is Dread, another fun movie.
Yeah, Dread's great. I will not be dissing Dread as an inclusion, because Dread it's a John Carpenter movie made long after John Carpenter stopped making good movies.
Yeah, it is flawless in my opinion. Again, a movie that I skipped in the theaters because I thought the poster looked dumb. And I couldn't help but see the Stallone movie in my head, which I don't really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So I skipped it.
Which is ridiculous, by the way, because I mean, Rob Schneider, one of the world's best actors, is in that movie, and on top of that, you also there's only so I could keep that sentence going before I buckled.
Yeah, pretty rough. I am the.
No, Dread.
There's enough corn in that film to where you can get by and have a good time watching it, but it's not good.
What we've confirmed though is that 2012 Tara was an idiot. That's what we've confirmed in this conversation.
I can't believe that I skipped this one in the theaters because I rented it and I rented it again and I rented it 3 or 4 times, I'm not sure, until I finally just bought it and watched it because it is so fun. And I've heard it's compared to The Raid. I haven't seen those films, but it was just such a nice, I don't know, palate cleanser from all the similar types of films that we've been getting, and really stylized, great villain in Lena Headey. Love that movie.
My number 6 is Under the Skin, and bizarrely, this has been a fairly frequent entry on these lists as well.
I'll put money it's only on 4 of them.
This is true. Matt did definitely not have Under the Skin on his list, but it's actually kind of nice to see something like this pop up as much as it has, because I think Under the Skin's a movie where I've told the story many a time where I went to see this and I saw it in a theater in Scotland and wondered why when I went to see it, like why is this room packed? Because I didn't know the movie was set in Scotland and made in Scotland even, and I realized 10 minutes and I started recognizing locations and I went, oh. That's why they're all here. But the beautiful thing about it, though, is when I realized why that's what they were all there, is that I just had this sort of smirk in my face, and I sort of thought about it and went, all these people heard this was in Scotland, and they're here out of some sort of weird patriotic nonsense. And all I could think was, the one thing I knew about this coming in, and at this point, we've already had the weird, like, bright white opening and the space stuff, and the wake up, and I'm like, this movie is art house as shit. 99% of the people in this room are going to hate this. They're going to hate this movie. And they probably did. Now, luckily, people where I live are polite enough not to be dicks in the theatre, so no one said that. It was just quiet the whole time.
No one got the phone out, was bored.
No,
I mean, it's hard to be bored in that movie, even if you don't like it.
Hypnotic. It's a movie where you feel the weight of, like, the darkness of everything that's happening. This alien being who's going around and killing men for whatever resource they need from them, and this story of, like, kind of finding humanity and almost the price of that, and the price of just how awful we are. And it's a really it's not even like it is a depressing movie, but it's a depressing in a very neutral way, where there is a positive side to it as well. It's just that, but there's also a really negative side to humanity. It's a very, very audacious film. It's very Kubrick-esque in a lot of ways. Maybe a little bit of David Lynch in there, just a little bit.
I get where you're coming
from. A
from.
little smidge. But ultimately, it's just a very engrossing time. It has some sights and sounds and some images and music and all these things. There's scenes where there'll just be a baby crying on a beach, but there'll be stuff happening around it that's quite dark, and it has this. There's a pulse to the ocean coming in. The shores sort of coming in and going. It has this pulse to the scene and it's very natural. There's no music in that scene.
There is a lot of quiet moments like that in the movie.
Yeah, it's a very philosophical movie. It's a very sort of reflection, type movie about us looking at ourselves. So it
says a lot about our group as a whole that so many of us had this on our list.
Yeah. Under the Skin is phenomenal. You should absolutely check it out. Unless everything I've said, if you find yourself aligning with Matt more often than not, maybe don't watch it. But if you find yourself liking what any of the rest of us recommend, then check out Under the Skin.
Number 5. It's a movie Pete made me see. He said we're going to do a review on it. I didn't want to. Because I don't like emotional movies. I don't like movies that make me feel things I don't want to feel. But I'll be damned if I didn't love this movie. And that's Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. And, oh, man. I thought I was ready. I was not ready. This movie went places that, when it was sold, it seemed like this young adult kind of, like when I saw the trailer and why I didn't want to see it, seemed like one of those disposable young adult, like Our Fault in the Stars kind of. But it's so much more than that. It's weirdly a love letter to film in places, in creativity.
It's a love letter to Werner Herzog, even more specifically.
Herzog, yeah. About friendship and what does it mean to actually be a friend, and one of my favorite teacher moments in a movie. Like I talked about Thomas Hayden Church earlier. We talked about Easy A up in the upper numbers, and as a counselor. But you have John Bernthal as the teacher in this movie, and he just seems like the coolest English teacher of all time. That's someone these kids really can confide in. And I wasn't expecting that at all, because up to this point, he was like an action guy. Like I had seen him in different action-y movies. I hadn't really seen him act. And man, that scene always sticks out to me when they drink his coffee and think that they've gotten dosed by stuff. It's a whole lot of fun. And I think Nick Offerman's in this too as well.
Yeah, he's
the dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's another. I forget he's in there, but yeah, the but the main character, and then how he deals with the dying girl, and their friendship that comes up over the course of that. Um, yeah, man, yeah, it made me cry. I haven't watched it since, but I just remember all of the main character's little movies that he makes and shows her, um, and how funny that was. Yes, such a good movie. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give anything away.
My number 5 is Your Name. This is an anime movie, which immediately Pete is like hating it.
I mean,
on nothing else.
I mean, at least it's no more fish porn. But I mean, I don't know that for sure though. I mean, I don't know what creepy anime it is.
There is no fish porn in this movie.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that disappoints you or not, but there's none. But
no, it's not about disappointing me. It's about disappointing you.
Well, clearly I had this above the movie with the fish, so obviously not disappointed. This is a movie about two people. This is a guy and a girl who start a relationship in a very unusual fashion.
Was he a skater boy?
No, he was not. At least I don't think so. Basically, one of them lives in the city and one of them's out in the country. And they have no interaction with each other, but one day they wake up in each other's bodies. You know, they've swapped bodies and they don't know what's gone on. And they at first they think it's just a dream. And it isn't until the next day when they're back in their own bodies that they kind of realize that, hang on, that was real. And, you know, the previous day actually happened and someone else lived my day. And they go through like that. And, you know, they understand what's happening over the course of the movie, and they start like leaving notes for each other, and you know they leave each other their phone numbers, and you know, hey, you know, if you're in my body today, can you make sure you go on this date with this person and such and such. And it's really unique like that. And then there's a giant curveball in the middle, which really throws a wrench in the whole story and opens it wide up, which I won't ruin. But it definitely makes it even more interesting than it already is.
Let me guess. Did she say, "See you later, boy"?
She did not. But on top of that, it is absolutely gorgeously animated. It is one of the best looking animated films I've ever seen. Like, top 3. It's incredible to look at. And, you know, and like I say, it's got a lot of heart. It's got a great twist. It's got some, you know, these sci-fi elements and twists and teases as it goes along. Yeah, it's fantastic.
I don't remember any more likes from Skater Boy to keep the joke going, so I'll just have to wrap it up here.
And kind of similar to Get Out, this is you know, a premiere debut of a, you know, prominent horror director, or well, we'll see if he makes more horror movies, but that would be Hereditary. You know, again, another movie that just feels like kind of came out of nowhere, but you know, had a lot of hype around it, but you know, certainly lived up to it. It's you know, from Ari Aster, who, man, you know, just does such a good job of creating like uncomfortable, awkward situations. It's you know, there are like some legitimate like scary horror moments, but the real, you know, unease and tension comes from just like this awkward family situation, and there's like jaw-dropping moments you know, where characters are doing stuff you know they shouldn't, and like you can't help but watch it, and it's so engrossing. And man, just like talk about one that just, you know, when the lights come up and you leave the theater, it just like sticks on you like for days. Like you're just thinking like, damn, I can't believe that happened. That's yeah, really, really great little movie.
Yeah, well, very unique child actor as well. A very memorable,
definitely, yeah,
child performance in that one. And that entire middle section is just, you get so much dread, and it's all, and every time I talk about this, I'm always impressed by the dread you feel, not for the supernatural stuff, but for just just for the other characters finding out something that's happened. It's just there's like a 10-minute section that is just absolutely soul destroying.
Yeah, and it's like you can't, like, as you're watching it, you're like, you don't want the character to do what they're doing, but at the same time, you're like, I don't know how I'd react. Like, I might do this. I might do the same thing.
Yeah, I might just be in shock and just kind of wait for the. It's that thing I always talk about, like, where you're a kid and you know you've done something wrong, you're going to get in trouble for, but there's a little bit of time before anyone's going to notice. So you just kind of have
Yeah.
to wait to get into trouble. You're just waiting for it to happen because you don't want to admit to it. You want to fess up.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, like, yeah, heartbreaking, like some of the stuff in there. But and again, though, like, you know, a lot of the kind of horror stuff on this list, like, you know, I mentioned, like, what's great about it is it has all this extra elements to it, but it doesn't sacrifice the horror for it. Like, there, you know, there's still horror stuff in it that works, and then, you know, and some people might argue that they don't like that stuff as much, and I totally get that. But for me, I like that, you know, it doesn't feel like it sells itself out, and, you know, it's like, oh no, you know, it's not a horror movie, you know, it's this or that. It's like, no, it totally is, and I like that it does that.
Number 5 is Inside Out. I don't know. I relate so much to the young girl in the film. Like, it's hard not to compare her story to mine. She moves from like Wisconsin to San Francisco, and when I was that same age, I moved from British Columbia to California, Southern California, and like it's about her like going through depression, but it's done in such like a clever way that kids will understand, you know, that it's okay to be sad. And I think it's just so special the way they like have these like compartments in her brain, and like of all the things that she likes, and it builds like this world out of that, things that she's passionate about. And I don't know, I think it's just so clever. I think it's the cleverest movie on here.
Yeah. What's funny is hearing you describe it, I'm like, man, this is like a kid's version of Mr. Robot. Now I'm thinking about it, but
Maybe.
my number 5 is one that everyone knew was coming. That is Inception, Christopher Nolan's film from right at the start of the decade. Starting the decade off on a high note, as it were, and he's about to do the same again. He's we're about to get to it in 2020.
Yeah, but I mean, he didn't end it particularly well.
Okay, fair. Yeah, Dunkirk was not my favorite of his by a long shot. Still better than the fish porn movie though.
Was it balls?
So, Inception is a wonderfully inventive movie that takes a simple premise. What if we could go inside people's dreams? And if we could do that, then what could we do in there? You know, can we store information? Can we have debates? Can we fight things out? And in this case, given what the title is, can we plant an idea that truly feels like the person's own idea? And it's really hard to do because, you know, you get inspiration from somewhere. It's very hard to fake true Inception where it's your idea from the core. And that's what the movie is. It's essentially a heist film and a science fiction package of creativity that builds a mythology as it goes, the rules of how time passes in the dream, of how dreams work within dreams, and how each dream within each dream affects the dream underneath it, and so on. And it leads to some wonderful action sequences. Honestly, the ending is one of my favorite endings of the entire decade. And I remember seeing that with a packed crowd on opening day, and not a super audible crowd. As I mentioned earlier, crowds here tend to be very polite and quiet and don't really make much noise. And I remember the ending. I won't say what the ending is. I won't spoil it. I'll just say when it cuts to black at the end, there was an audible "oh," like just sort of like frustration in a good way. It was like because it was that moment I went, Nolan's got you wrapped around his finger. He's got me wrapped around his finger, but he's got the guy who made that noise. He's definitely got him wrapped around his finger, and it was beautiful. And also, Time is like one of my favorite soundtrack.
Oh, it's so
pieces
good
of all time.
I mean, that might be Zimmer's best work. Not necessarily just that track, but that movie in general might be like Zimmer's best work.
There's 2 tracks, and they're actually kind of similar in style, but there's 2 tracks that I always say are Zimmer's best. Time from Inception and Journey to the Line from the Thin Red Line. Those 2 are hand in hand the 2 best Zimmer pieces that exist. They're phenomenal. But Inception is a wonderful action movie full of just... I think that I've been describing movies on this list, I've been using the word inventive a lot, and I think it's what I really appreciate, because there's so many movies that I watch that are kind of forgettable and just bland and in the middle of the road that just don't feel like they're trying anything. They just feel like, okay, we're doing this because this is the stereotype that works, or this is the archetype, this is the format, the template that everyone's using, or we can use for this particular genre or this particular style of plot. And I see a movie like Inception, you know, or The Cabin in the Woods, you know, I said a few entries ago, and I just see people just firing all cylinders, just saying, what can we do with this? Let's play with this. We've got our little play set. What can we do with this that's different? And Inception is kind of just the highest of the highs of that. So,
Are you really trying to tell me that The Shape of Water isn't inventive?
Rule 34 existed long before Shape of Water came out.
All right, so number 4, and I will just say this is the last Marvel movie on my list. Do you want to give a guess, Pete, which one it is?
At this point,
Yeah.
gotta be Guardians of the Galaxy at this point, right? No?
No, it is not. No, Guardians is it's in my top 10, but I tried to limit this to 5, so it wasn't too much.
Oh, you've not said Winter Soldier yet.
Nah, and it's Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So going into this, being familiar with comics, I was familiar with the Winter Soldier storyline and what that meant. And however, the way that plot elements are revealed, I was not expecting the Russos to nail it the way they did. And then the fact that they had nailed the story so well, they were given the keys to the rest of the Avengers movies going forward. Well, it wasn't. Was this after? This is post Ultron, right?
No, this was pre-Ultron.
Pre Ultron.
But it was
so post Ultron.
It was 1 year before though, so Ultron was already like,
yeah,
you know,
planned and whatnot.
half done. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, just all the characters in this one. It's Steve getting to be the Captain America that I'm familiar with, and his relationship with Black Widow. I feel it's never been better than in this movie, and the villain. We have the Winter Soldier, and how that's handled. He's almost like a slasher movie villain for the first half, where he's just this unstoppable killing machine, and you really start to not fear exactly, but you know, characters start dropping, and it seems like all is lost at certain points. And how's Cap going to recover from this? And then it starts taking political thriller plot twists, and yeah, it's one that I can say it is. It probably would be in the top 10 movies of all time of mine. I just enjoy it that much, not just comic movies, but just all movies. And it plays the political thriller element of it. But it never stops being a superhero movie at the same time. Very big superhero movie ending, despite having some of these quieter spy moments and whatever. But yeah, easily the best Captain America movie by far. And my wife will fight me on that because she loves Civil War. But I feel Civil War is a lot like Iron Man 2, that it has to, you know, be this wedge that drives everything else going forward. That kind of tracks. But this one is really good. Really, really, really good.
My number 4 is a movie I really like, and I've lost count of how many times I've seen this movie now. This is Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Oh my god,
I love this movie so much.
Oh, your list is such shite. You know that. Like,
it's really not.
It so is. This movie is so overrated. It's so
not.
overrated. And I love Edgar Wright. I love Hot Fuzz. I love Shaun of the Dead. But I have to say,
I like it more than any of those Cornetto movies.
So the reason why I don't like this, I don't dislike it, right? I think it's fine. It's a fine movie. But people love this movie. People love Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And I just don't get it.
No, I don't mean to interrupt you or anything, but this is my list. And can I talk about why I like this movie?
I'll allow it.
Yeah, thank you. This movie is one of those, you know when like you're ill and you just want to put something on that like, oh, that'll make me feel better. You know, I'll just put, you know, comfort movies. This is one of those where I know that I'll just enjoy this no matter what mood I'm in. No matter, like, you know, sometimes you put on a film, you go, oh, do you know what? I'm not really in the mood for this movie. You know, 10 minutes in and you'd be like, oh, I'm just not feeling it. Never with this movie. I can put it on at any point and enjoy it and love it. It's
At least
just a great cast. Everyone's having fun. Go on.
I was gonna say at least Tim had the dignity to put this in the bottom half.
Yeah, well, Tim's wrong. I'm sorry. I love this movie. I love everything about it.
Do you know what? This is one of those movies where I thought it was fine, and then people praised it to high heavens that it made me dislike it just a bit because it just like, there's something just really obnoxious about the humor of Scott Pilgrim that kind of bugs me.
I get that.
And it's kind of why I don't like Harley Quinn. It's why I don't like Deadpool. It's that type of humor that I just don't like. Firefly.
I think what I will say is I'm willing to accept this is not necessarily a quote unquote better movie than even some of the ones I've had on this list. But it's a movie that I love more and I would, always want to watch. And that's kind of what this came down to for me. Like, I recently had Parasite at 6. That's probably a better movie than this. At face value, technical, script. Yeah, it's probably better.
I feel
I
like
love this movie more.
I feel like the word probably has been thrown around a lot here, and I don't think you understand the meaning of the word.
I use probably because it's not like an objective fact. No matter how much you might think it is.
This feels pretty objective, thank you very much. This feels pretty objective.
My number 4, that would be It Follows. A movie that that we're both quite fond of. You'll see it high on our decade horror list. But yeah, this is another one where other than being expertly directed and having like a cool style and tone to it, again it has something to say. It's a movie. It's an interesting horror movie that makes it well worth it watching for multiple reasons, I guess. But again, similar to the other ones I talked about, like it's also works just as a horror movie. Like it is genuinely creepy, has very cool, interesting premise I haven't really seen in other movies, and it's just a lot to like about it.
I also enjoy this film.
Number 4 is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
I'm shocked.
I know. Number 4. It was number 1 last week.
Number 1 on the sci-fi list. This is obviously including more things.
Yeah. So most of these films are like a 10.
For the record, I know what.
But this is where my 11 out of 10 start.
I know what 2 of your top 3 are. For the record, I want to make that clear. I can name 2 of them.
Okay. You don't have to do it. I'll name them for you. So, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, very, very much a surprise, because the first Rise of the Planet of the Apes was a surprise, like we already talked about when we talked about War. It was just a franchise reboot that I didn't know we wanted or turns out needed. And Dawn just takes that world and takes these characters and improves on it somehow. And it's a different director, and the look is slightly different, and it's a lot more layered than the first one. And it's just so, I don't know, we gushed about it a lot in the first.
Yeah.
In the last.
And the director's changing could have been a warning sign. Like it could have been like a sign that maybe this the first one was really surprisingly good, but like maybe it'll go downhill now because it's a different director. Luckily, Matt Reeves, who'd done some okay stuff before then, but really was hitting his stride with this. Like I feel like because Let Me In was a good remake of Let Me In, but it's not as good as that movie. Cloverfield is well done for what it is, but it's Cloverfield. Like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is the one where it's like, oh shit, Matt Reeves has got game. Like he's got skill.
Yeah, it is. The storyline between, the antagonist, yeah, it's the humans. It's Gary Oldman and all his crew, but it's really Caesar in struggle with himself, and Koba represents a part of him that's angry at people and wants to be at war. And it's him trying to take a side and say, no, we have to be better than that. We have to be better than that, because then we're just like them and we'll always be at war. But Koba can't forgive, and you kind of side with Koba a lot too. He's wearing the scars of what humans did to him. And it's what a great film.
No, it's wonderfully layered. I've said,
I don't want to gush too much because this video is already so long.
Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, I've said multiple times, is a modern sci-fi masterpiece because I think it genuinely is. I left the theater I left the theater from that going, whoa! I got like sci-fi'd, like in the best possible way, where
well, I got sci-fi.
Well, yeah, because it does this thing where it says
We
so.
should change our podcast name to that.
I got sci-fied. We can work it in. It could be a new catchphrase if you want. But like it really did this thing where like all great science fiction does, where it had so much to say about people and what we're like and what we do, but it did it through this lens of, oh, there's apes that are intelligent and can fight and talk and walk, and well, apes can walk. You know what I mean? Like all these things.
Yeah.
And it does it in a way that just makes so much sense, where you're sympathetic for both sides and you want them to work it out. And the film's a tragedy. At its core, it is a tragedy because you want them somehow to work this out, but deep down you know they can't, and that's what makes it hurt the entire time. But it makes you want it. It makes you fight for it. Every time I watch it, I'm hoping that somehow it's a new cut of the film. It's going to have a different ending, and it just never does. And it's beautiful.
Well, they gotta get on those horses and fight. Apes on horses.
My number 4 is Locke. This is the Tom Hardy sitting in a car movie where he is on his own talking to a phone, occasionally himself a little bit, but mostly just on the phone to various people. And throughout the story, we discover why he left his work, why he's going in this well, it's not overnight really. It's just the movie's like 90 minutes, maybe 100 minutes long. It's like, why is he making this 90-minute trip? And abandoning his job because he's like the head engineer or architect or whatever he is for this new building that's being built. And why is he doing this? And over the course of the film, it sort of slowly reveals the why, what's happening, why it's important to him, and so much of it is just great character work. It is some of my favorite movies of all time. Work and the script works because they build such a compelling reason deep within the character for why they're doing what they're doing, that by the time you learn it and by the time it clicks into place, it feels so justified and it feels so, I don't know, just earned. You feel this like Paris, Texas is the big example for me, where I that's one of my favorite movies of all time, and the motivations for the character in that as they sort of slowly become revealed, and then you get to the ending and kind of everything it is and why he's doing what he's doing, whether or not it's art, because there's an argument in this movie where he's not that bad a guy if he doesn't do this. Like, it's not the worst thing ever, but it's really important to him. And the learning of why over the course, as it's revealed through different conversations, and how he's kind of refusing to tell anyone what's going on to a point, although he tells some people and because he has to, and it.
Yeah, but he doesn't tell anyone like the whole thing. You get fragments. Yeah. As an audience, we get fragments over various conversations with different people. Yeah,
so Tom Hardy, so if you ever see Venom, if you're unfortunate enough to watch Venom, just go watch this afterwards and remind yourself that Tom Hardy's actually an incredible actor. He's just sometimes in shite.
He is doing exactly what he was supposed to do in Venom as well.
Which is why it's a bad movie.
Yeah, but it's fun to watch.
No, it's not. It's dull. It's dull.
It's not dull.
It's not a fun, bad movie.
I just put it on the record that I did have Locke on my list. I think it was at like number 50, but it was on my list, and Venom was not. Not to ruin my top 3, but I'm not saying Venom's a better movie than Locke.
Honestly, given the quality of some of your recent picks, I think Venom might have shown up in the top 3. I wouldn't have been surprised.
And my number 3 is Get Out. Jordan Peele's directorial debut. Another one where I heard nothing but hype about. Me and my wife go see it, and it was justified. It felt like everything I love in a Twilight Zone episode, just delivered for a modern sensibility. And just some of the people that are like Keith Stanfield, who's in everything, right now has a bit role in this. The Daniel Kaluuya, he became a name out of this, and is it a horror movie? Because I know it gets put under suspense.
Oh, it is. That's definitely a horror movie.
Yeah, this is when I say my type of horror. If it's not like a Jason-style fun slasher, it's something more like this, a little bit more cerebral. So that's why when Us came out earlier this year, I was a bit disappointed because I went with such high hopes because it's Jordan Peele for what he did with Get Out, and just there's still parts of that movie that I can have discussions with friends about. And it doesn't feel dated in that way. It doesn't feel like if you know the ending, if it changes anything. In fact, you can put different things you look through it with the 2019 lens versus when this came out, 2016,
17.
2017. You look at it in the 2017 lens, and it's almost, I don't want to say a different movie, but you get a different view from it. And Bradley Whitford, again, him showing up here and stealing his scenes. And the mom and her creepy tea spoon, like that's a sound that should make my teeth grate, but it does because of stuff that happens in this movie. Yeah, it's fantastic.
My number 3 it's a biggie. This is Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, controversial choice amongst the interwebs, I'm sure, because some people despise this film, me included.
I don't despise it. That's too hard. That's too strong for me.
That is too strong. You dislike it, whereas there are people who despise it. You never cared enough in the first place to really despise it.
I respect that it tried to be different. I just think the execution's all over the place.
That's fair. You're not one of those people online, and I don't even have to describe them because it's The Last Jedi and everyone knows what those people are.
But those people, what it means is the people who go, wait, who's in charge in the fleet in this movie? Oh, women. Those people.
Yes, those people. No, this movie is fantastic. It does something very different for a Star Wars film. It kind of breaks the mold. I know some people really don't like the pacing and the structure and some of the side things, but for me, it all contributes so much, and especially as the key theme of the movie is failure and learning to overcome that, and that sometimes you are going to fail and you need to understand why and go from there. And so there are large portions where characters do something and it doesn't work, it fails, but it really adds to this thematic point of the whole movie, and everything comes to a head in a gorgeous sequence at the end that is so good to watch. I was lucky enough to see this on the IMAX recently, and it looks even better than I remembered. It's so good.
My number 3, that would be a movie you and I both love called The Shape of Water. My boy GDT is just killing it this decade. It's hard to pick, just one movie of his. But I mean, really the standout for me was The Shape of Water. I was so happy when I saw it. It's really cool movie. It's a romance between a woman and a fish man. Who doesn't want to watch that on the big screen? But I mean
Tim, first of all, you started this by saying we both love. I want to just put in the proper correction right now that is factually inaccurate.
Okay.
This movie is not good. How dare you?
When I said we, I meant me and the the people who picked the Oscars.
Okay, sure. Yes.
So smart people, I guess. But no, you're obviously insane because this is just such a beautiful movie with tons of heart. I weeped like a baby in the theater. I'm not gonna lie. Stellar performances, cool special effects. I mean, what else do you want? I don't know. If you don't like this, then I guess you don't like movies. I don't know. This is a movie ass movie,
This is a movie ass movie. That's your defense. That's your defense of Shape of Water. Okay. Wasn't for me. I never understood why she screwed the fish. I never quite clicked. Never justified it.
I mean, have you seen that fish?
I don't think you're expecting this one. It is What We Do with the Shadows.
Whoa, okay, no, I was not. I was not expecting this to... Well, I know what number 1 and 2 are now, but I was not expecting this. I was not expecting What We Do in the Shadows, which...
Yeah, this was a really easy one for me to place at number 3, because I've watched this movie so many times. I watch it regardless of what season I'm in. In fact, I watched it like 2 days ago. I don't know if people don't know, it's a mockumentary of vampires living today in New Zealand, and they all are flatmates together. And definitely the best comedy in the last 10 years. And if you count it as horror, it's the best horror in the last 10 years.
I wouldn't, not really, but
and it gave us a TV show, which only has one season, but I think is also like a 10. I love it. Oh my God.
I genuinely think the TV show's better.
I think they're about equal. I really love these three characters. And then we get Nick added on, watching Nick go through his transition into a vampire. And he's like just this no nonsense, like very blunt person. Like he has emotions and you buy him that he has emotions, but he's so monotone the whole time. It's so good.
My number 3 is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Matt Reeves coming in and blowing us all away with his middle chapter to the Apes trilogy. In terms of like an entire complete franchise, not every franchise, can start, and end in one decade. All of them will cross over in either end. But in terms of just like a complete experience from every entry in a series this decade, nothing compares to the Apes trilogy. I don't think anything even comes close. And Dawn is the standout of the three for me, and they're all great movies, but Dawn, I went to see it, and I remember being kind of nervous because the first one, Rise, I've told the story many a time about this one where I'm like, oh, who wants this? Who wants this new Apes reboot? This is silly. Why are we bothering with this? And then it proved why it existed. It was like, no, we had a great idea to do a new version of this story, and it holds up with the others, and it's got great new characters. You're going to root for Caesar, blah blah blah. And I left that movie feeling really enthused by it and feeling like, okay, this was great. I kind of want to see more of this. But it was a different director, and even though Matt Reeves had done Cloverfield, but that was not bad. Cloverfield's an okay movie, but and he did Let Me In, which was the Let the Right One In remake, and that was solid, but it still kind of suffered because it was a remake, and it was kind of redundant. And so I got into this not really knowing what Matt Reeves can do, away from those things. And he completely and utterly in one movie said, no, I'm a director you're going to care about and pay attention to the things that I do in the future, because this movie is a perfect science fiction story about using, and most science fiction does this, but this is really at the forefront of everything it's doing in the plot. It's saying, hey, we're going to talk about human beings. We're going to talk about tribalism. We're going to talk about how conflict arises, and we're going to do it using talking apes and humans in a post-apocalyptic world. And it does it perfectly. And you're rooting for characters on both sides of the conflict. You want them to find peace, and you believe they can, even though you know they can't, because the whole point of the movie is that it's going to break down. But you're rooting for them anyway. And every time I watch it, I want to believe. I'm like, maybe this is a new cut. Maybe I've loaded up a new cut of the movie that has a happier, third act. You want it so bad. And me and Tara joke all the time actually about Jason Clarke, how this movie made us love him. And every movie he's been in since, it's been terrible. He's been the terrible John Connor in Terminator Genisys. He was in Winchester, which was garbage. He's in the Pet Sematary remake that last year, which was terrible. Like, he keeps having the worst roles in Hollywood. It is absolutely insane. But he's great in this. Kerry Russell's pretty good in this. Obviously, Serkis is Caesar. Toby Kebbell, who I don't typically like, but he's good. Good as the villainous ape in this. I'm forgetting his name now. Koba.
Yes.
Yeah, took me aside. Koba. Joe, in my head, it was like Scar. I'm like, it's not Scar, that's Lion King. Don't say Scar.
Number 2 is a Christopher Nolan movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with an I, and it's Inception, right? This 2010 though, right?
Yeah, 2010. This counts.
Okay. Yeah, Inception. This was a movie that I knew nothing about. The trailers didn't tell me anything. I remember seeing the very first teaser trailer, not knowing what to think. And then even the first time I saw it in theaters, didn't know exactly what to think. And another one that rewards you over multiple viewings. And just some of the cinematography that he was able to achieve, the shooting as practically as possible. So I remember seeing the still of Joseph Gordon-Levitt in the floating room, and they built that. It was up on arms, and they would actually spin it and whatnot. And I'm like, man, that's filmmaking that we don't get too much anymore. And, almost 10 years later, still kind of don't. Like, that's where Nolan kind of sets himself apart, is that he still tries to do this And funnily enough, his latest movie, I'm getting the same vibes of, not story-wise, but the feeling of it, well, not knowing what this movie is. And he's kind of the master at this point, that he gives you these little seeds, and I feel like that kind of all started with Inception.
Tenet's definitely giving me Inception vibes in the sense of how it feels and the type of movie it's going to be. I mean, I don't expect it to be about getting into minds, but it feels, it's giving me similar vibes. Yeah,
and just the whole dream logic and the amount of research that him and his brother both did into dreams to make it feel, weirdly as it sounds, scientifically accurate, right? And you start doing dreams within dreams, and you know, the whole idea of having that tie back to reality, and then you get to the ending, which people still debate about and what it all means. But it's up there with The Dark Knight. I put them back and forth between my favorite Nolan movie. It's usually going to be Dark Knight, but sometimes Inception's up there.
It is. And the reason I'm pausing here isn't for dramatic effect, is that I genuinely haven't decided between my 1 and 2. So I'm going to pick La La Land. Another one that Pete just really doesn't like. He hates this top bunch of my list. I think for him, all the movies that he liked were a lot lower down. There was parts of this list where Pete think was so bad, and then this top 5. And Pete really does not like my top 5. I love this movie. It's this is the musical from Damien Chazelle, and it is this jazz inspired musical with a great story between these two characters that has a really natural, organic end of their relationship that is different to what you would just see as it goes through. And some incredibly moving pieces of music. I don't get how anyone can not love this movie. It just hits in all the right places.
My number 2, that would be The Witch, aka the Vivitch.
God damn it! That was my guess for number 1, you prick.
It was close. I love this movie. It's we mentioned The Lighthouse a little bit earlier. Robert Eggers' second film. And again, talking about Get Out and Hereditary, like these kind of, that's what stands out for me this decade. I actually do think it was a pretty good decade for horror, and I think really like the flagship of it was like these kind of out of nowhere movies that just kind of come onto the scene that just have such like a cool direction and voice to them, and are something unique about it. And like The Witch, I just love the attention to detail. It looks like so old timey, and they use like actual dialogue taken from like journals from that period, and the performances are great, and it's so creepy. And yes, obviously I love the main character, Black Phillip.
The main character.
He's just amazing as far as actors go. And again, like so I keep saying with all these horror movies where it's like it's still like really good, does really good horror stuff while also like setting itself apart, and not just being like generic jump scare blah 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 Hollywood thing you see. It's like, oh no, this is a cool horror movie that's like a slow burn that's doing something different. And I love it. It's great. Go watch it if you haven't seen it.
My number 2 is Creed.
Whoa, okay. I might have been leaning towards the other one as number 2. I might have thought it was going to be the other way around. I'm actually a little bit surprised that Creed's number 2. So
yeah, I mean, Creed is flawless. Like, I thought that the trailer looked good. I was never like a Rocky fan. Like, I think the first 2 movies are pretty good. And then they go like that Rambo turn where they get kind of goofy, but they're still like watchable. The first one is pretty good though. And I'm not like invested in this franchise, but I went and saw Creed like at a theater where they serve wine to you if you want it. So I was a little, drunk. And there is a scene somewhere midway in this film where it is a fight scene that's all in one take. And maybe it was the wine, but I was in my seat like dodging punches the whole time. It really does like put you into the fight. And it's so I didn't really know about Ryan Coogler. Like he had done Fruitvale Station before, and I think some like student films. And I ended up seeing Fruitvale Station later, which is an excellent movie. We should all watch it. But Creed is just blew me away. And I saw it 3 times in the theater, and each time I was just like, I'm just so impressed by this film. It's a really like nice love story about like 2 people who both have something that they're really struggling with. She's a singer who's losing her hearing, and he's trying to break out of the shadow of his father, but also following the footsteps of his father. He has a really complex relationship because he was the son of Apollo Creed, but never was, I don't know, like he was sort of the illegitimate son of Apollo Creed. So like he wants to have the name, but he also doesn't. It's like a really complex father-son story without the father even being present. I cry like 4 times during this film every time I watch it. It's so emotional. It's such a great story about family and, trying to live up to your name. And I love it. And I'll watch anything that Ryan Coogler makes because everything he touches turns to gold. So
what I think's funny about Creed is that it's essentially all comes from Rocky 4, and Rocky 4 is by far the goofiest Rocky movie with a robot in it.
Creed 2 was.
Yeah. Oh, Creed 2
Creed
definitely
2 came from Rocky 4.
But even Creed 1 to an extent does, because it's like we're talking about Creed's son, and his father's death is brought up repeatedly, and it's like that was Rocky 4. We've got this really intense, good drama.
I know it's like a successor to that film, which is, you're right, like the goofiest of all.
Yeah, but Creed is like this great little drama about like you say, family and like living up to like your legacy and all that. It's like, so really really bizarre. I will say that it has like it holds back in using music from Rocky until one moment in the film, and I will say that the moment it kicks in is freaking phenomenal. That's all I'm going to say.
So it's such a fist pump movie, and it makes me love Rocky, which is a character that I thought was fine before, but like, man, he's good in this too. And I had heard like reviews about it, and people were saying that Stallone should get an Oscar for it, and I just kind of would roll my eyes like, Stallone. But then I saw it, I was like, yes, give him the Oscar, he's so good.
My number 2 is Drive. People knew this was coming. This was, again, early in the decade, 2011. This was my introduction to reffing, although, bizarrely, the least reffing of the reffing movies. Drive is oozing with style. It gives your main character, who barely speaks, doesn't even have a name, he's just the driver. And it's this tragic tale of him trying to have something happier in his life, and whether or not he can have that better thing, because of the underworld that he's a part of. This was one of those movies where the soundtrack, it's funny because, again, bringing up Birds of Prey, I was complaining how the soundtrack was it felt just song after song after song. It just felt like it was just every 2 minutes there was a song. Drive has got a soundtrack where everything feels so meticulously picked, and it's not constant throughout the movie. Every single one feels like a big deal, and they're much more memorable because of that. I after one viewing of this in the theater, I left going, oh, I need to find out what that opening track. I need to know what the.
I think a big part of this with this, because it is a phenomenal soundtrack, don't get me wrong. I think part of it is that the score that Cliff Martinez does around it is actually very stylistically similar, and all the songs kind of fit into the same genre anyway. They're all very similar songs in terms of style, so they mesh really, really well, and it just flows between them and the score naturally.
Drive is one of those movies where I was kind of sucked in from the moment I started. When I was in the theater, and it looked good. I think I'd seen a trailer, and I was intrigued by it. And it's that moment at the start where the camera's just kind of tracking in behind him as he's waiting at the window, and then we have that opening 10-minute sequence of him driving the crooks away from the cops, and it's just very, very tense, very stylized, and it almost makes you go, we're reffing, do more scenes like this. Even though I love all your slow scenes of neon lighting and staring, this could be, you could have more of this. Like this scene right here, this scene is what I wanted out of Baby Driver. It was just lots of scenes like this. Baby Driver unfortunately had to have other things throughout. Baby Driver's a poor man's Drive.
I want it noted that I had both on my list, but I did have Drive 30 places higher. So, I am aware that Drive is significantly better.
Finally, number 1, The Nice Guys.
Okay.
I unapologetically love this movie. It's Ryan Gosling doing my favorite Ryan Gosling stuff. Him saying, Russell Crowe playing the tough guy, and then asking him why is he all wet, and Gosling 100% telling him, I had to go question the mermaids, that are at this party. It's full of these two guys just playing off of each other, doing the 70s noir cop thing that I just love. It has shades of Chinatown, but as much as I enjoy Chinatown, it's way more coherent than Chinatown. When you get to the end, you understand the motivations behind everything, and what this means for those characters. But yeah, man, just those two guys just at the top of their games. And Shane Black, it's my favorite Shane Black movie easily. And he makes a lot of good movies. He's written a lot of good movies. I enjoy his, but this one it really hit. And this was coming off Iron Man 3, right?
Yeah, that was the before this. Yeah.
Iron Man 3, high expectations, and it met every single one. I still remember going to an early showing to see this and just being have the best day for the rest of the day because I love this movie that much. And the girl, Angry Rice, I'm surprised we haven't seen too much of her. She showed up in some of the Spider-Man movies, but I haven't seen too much with her in them, and she steals every scene she's in. She could have earned the best supporting actress nom for her role in this one, playing Gosling's daughter. But yeah, just the pace of it, the dialogue that's all there. Never gets too actiony despite being Shane Black. You think that. It has just the right amount. And yeah, man, this is a movie. Once I agreed to make this list, I was like, what am I going to put number 1? Is it this or Inception? And it ended up being The Nice Guys.
Yeah, that's fair. Honestly, the most surprising thing about this movie is that there's almost nothing to do with Christmas in it. Because Shane Black loves to set his movies at Christmas, and this one doesn't really
even
have
Iron
that.
Man 3 has a Christmassy vibe.
Yeah.
With the snow, and it's never outwardly said that it's Christmas, but there's stuff if you look for it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and Kiss Bang Bang is all about Christmas, right?
That's set all around Christmas. Yeah, Long Kiss Goodnight set at Christmas. Lethal Weapon 1 set at Christmas.
Yeah, that's what he does.
It's Shane Black's thing.
Yeah, it's a fun script. Followed up with The Predator, which I was super disappointed about. That movie wasn't good. But yeah, The Nice Guys number 1. I'm surprised. I'm more surprised that I left Kong Skull Island off, which it should be in the top 15. But stupid me. That's what happens when I watch hockey and make lists.
Number 1, Whiplash. The perfect double feature to go with La La Land there is, of course, Damien Chazelle's other piece that came out a couple of years beforehand, 2014, I think. And this is a movie that I fell in love with from the first time I saw it. I saw this 4 or 5 times in the cinema alone because it was just so meticulously done. It is, of course, about a student at a, he's got to do a music school. He's on a jazz course, a drummer, and he's got a terrible teacher who might be the best teacher. It's J.K. Simmons being terrible / amazing, and Miles Teller, who deserves everything he gets thrown at him. just because of his face more than anything. But the movie works, and it is, you know, this jazz story about, you know, pushing himself beyond your limits, trying to become better, and not settling for what he got, you know, what he had there and then, and whether or not ultimately that was a healthy thing to do, because, you know, it's at the expense of other relationships, other things in his life. And it's a good question: is this fame, you know, this glory, is it worth it? Is it worth, you know, putting yourself through that and sacrificing those things? And I think it's interesting that, you know, you can take this in either way, if you really wanted to. Like, you know, the character for a long time does think of this as worth sacrificing those other elements of his life to get this almost immortality in fame, and in creating the perfect music. But in this film, it's so wonderfully tense in a movie that is about, you know, a drummer. But some incredible music in the jazz stuff, of course. But even just outside that, the actual score, lots of drones, and, you know, drums and drones is how I would describe the actual score as well. And just wonderfully tense and impactful. Has some huge moments that land so well. And every time I come out of this film, I'm like, oh, maybe I should do more work, you know, actually work harder. And then I'm like, oh, but should I? And, you know, the editing as well, it's so frantic, but not in a bad way. It follows this rhythm. And, you know, like I say, it's fast paced. There's a lot of cutting around, which can be a bad thing in a lot of movies. But in this movie, every cut works. It's always, you know, to the beat of the piece that's going on. And it's got such a rhythm, a pulse to it that, yeah, I love it on a technical level as well as its story.
Number one, it's got to be Parasite. Man, this is. Have you gotten a chance to see this yet? Or
I'll be seeing it soon. I'm going to review it with Connor soon, but I've not watched it yet, so no spoilies.
Okay, so yeah, I won't spoil anything. But it's just, it's phenomenal. And again, another South Korean movie on the list. The performances are great. I don't really want to get into the story because there's, yeah, like a lot of cool stuff that happens. I really don't want to spoil anything. Yeah, I'll maybe give like kind of like a brief synopsis. I guess maybe kind of what the outline of it, but I mean, essentially, it's a this kind of like poor lower class family, and the son in it, he goes to starts to tutor, give like English lessons to the daughter of this, like, rich upper class family, and then the whole family is kind of become entwined, and a lot of cool stuff happens. And again, this is just it's a movie that has like something to say. Like, there's lots of stuff you can give it, like, it has great directing, it has great performances, it's really funny in parts, it gets like kind of dark in parts, there's stuff that you wouldn't expect, and you get lots of feelings and emotions, but even all that stuff aside, it's something that has something to say, and it's something that's very relevant of our times, which is it's talking about class, and it's like anti-capitalist, and but I think it does it in a very interesting and realistic way, where it's like it's not like over the top or anything, but it's really cool. It's man, I wish I could say more. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but this is one I'd heard a lot of hype about, and I went to see it probably like late October. I still think about it to this day, and I love that it's been doing so well. It's like selling out theaters, which I think is surprising for the US for like a subtitled non-mainstream movie, that like even a month after it's out, like people are still like packing the theater for it. I think that's really cool, and I guess that's all I'll say about it. But it's really phenomenal, and maybe there's a little bit of recency bias, sure, I don't know. I think it's phenomenal and really sticks out to me as the best of the decade.
My number one, you can say it with me if you want, The Hateful Eight.
Yeah. I mean, I think anyone who pays attention to, or anyone who watches the Ace like regularly probably could have guessed a couple of these that were coming up at the top, because they get mentioned.
This movie's perfect. I thought I have to. I'll admit though, it did grow on me, like a lot. It was like an acquired taste, but once I had it, like I could watch this movie on repeat for the rest of my life. If it was the one movie I had to watch for the rest of my life, I could probably be happy with The Hateful Eight. It is the movie of the decade for me. It is ensemble, just Tarantino at his best for dialogue, I think. Every character is so wonderfully written and unique, and probably my favorite Sam Jackson and Kurt Russell performance.
Well, that's saying something, because they've been in a lot of movies. They've been in a lot of movies, a lot of good movies to that.
A lot of good movies.
Yeah.
They own this movie. And Walton Goggins too. Oh, so great. Yeah. This is my number one. I'm sure a lot of people who don't watch these are like scratching their heads right now, but are like, wasn't The Hateful Eight just okay? No. Watch it again. It is way more than just okay.
What's funny is Walton Goggins for me, this wasn't my introduction to him, because I watched and loved The Shield, the TV show from FX, which he was in. He was one of the main characters. So I had seen him for 7 seasons in that. So I knew Walton Goggins very well. And I just thought it was cool. Oh, hey, he's Shane from The Shield is in a Tarantino movie. And then, well, not in this one. That was in Django Unchained, because he was in Django Unchained first. And then he was in this, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then obviously just recently we saw him in Righteous Gemstones, and I'm like, man, I like Walton Goggins a lot. He's really good. He's typecast as a dickhead, but I mean, that's okay. It was funny is I remember going to see this, and it just so happened that it was snowing here when I went to see it. So I actually got to, when I went to the theater, the theater was like covered in snow, and there was snow all over the car park and stuff. It set the mood, because I went into the theater and then the movie started and it was snow, and I was like, huh, this is suiting my surroundings at the present time.
Yeah, it's a movie that I went and saw, and when I left, I went, that was kind of like what if Tarantino wrote a play, because it all takes place in one like set, and it is very like theatrical that way. He has this weird thing with lighting where he'll make like spotlights for some reason. Like there's just a table that's lit up by a spotlight, but it doesn't like detract from the film. It just makes it feel a bit more like you're watching the play, and it's got like clue elements in it. The score is done by Ennio Morricone. I love the score to this film. He beat John Williams that year. How about that? So, yeah, my favorite movie of the decade, Hateful Eight.
Number one is It Follows. And I don't know how much people struggled with their picks for number one. For me, there was never a doubt. For me, the second I sat down to do this, It Follows was number one before I even started making a list, and nothing challenged it. Like, there was obviously everything in my top 10 or whatever was close because they're all up there, but there was never a doubt in my mind that It Follows was going to be my number one. It's one of those special occasions when I went to the theater and I kind of left, and it was a movie that I didn't really know what to expect going into it. I'd heard kind of, I'd seen the trailer, the plot sounded kind of silly, and I went in. And sometimes a movie just feels like it was made just for you. Sometimes a movie or a TV show feels like it was just made just for you and your sensibilities. And this is a film that the style of filmmaking harkens back to John Carpenter's like heyday. It's a film that's got a supernatural entity, but is completely filled with rules that make sense. And over the course of the film, the characters learn those rules and then try to figure out ways to exploit them in order to succeed in defending themselves. It's John Carpenter's shooting style from, say, Halloween meets the fighting back attitude of Dream Warriors, and you have a synth soundtrack that is perfect for it. You put all this together and you have my perfect throwback horror movie that feels timeless, intentionally so. And I love characters being proactive in these movies. I love them coming together to fight back. This movie does that in spades. It has and it's about something. It's got a story behind it. And there's the obvious thing to say, well, it's about safe sex and blah, 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 because it's about a sexually transmitted ghost. This movie is about the loss of innocence and how once you've lost it, it never comes back. It's about growing up. It's a coming-of-age story. And the entity, the demon, or whatever you want to call it, is nothing but a metaphor for how your reputation or your leaving your childhood behind is always kind of behind you, and it's always kind of chasing up to you. Your past is always kind of there, just peeking over your shoulder, and how terrifying it is to actually have to face that. It's kind of wonderful. And yeah, there's some sex stuff in there too, but like, that's really what it's about. There's so many other little things in the movie that add to that theme, about them talking about how, when they were young, they weren't allowed to go past a certain street because, that was the bad part of the city. That was the part they weren't supposed to go in because it wasn't safe for them. So at the end of the movie, where do they go to fight this demon? They go into this, previously bad part of the city they weren't supposed to go to. It's all about them losing their innocence and giving up that kind of, losing a little bit of themselves that they're never going to get back. And that's kind of terrifying. It's terrifying getting old and never being able to go back to those more innocent, ignorant times. And what's better than a concoction that I have just described? Nothing. Certainly not screwing a fish. So It Follows is my number one. And there you have all of our top 50s finally complete. This series took a long time to shoot, it took a long time to edit and put out, so hopefully you've had fun with this series, but we're not quite done yet, because I do have some statistics from the lists that I think are worth sharing. Hopefully you have some fun with these. I certainly thought there was a few interesting tidbits of information in here to see how people compare. There was 158 movies submitted between all 5 lists. Obviously that means there was a lot of overlap, which is the first thing I kind of want to go through, is kind of point out the movies that were on like the more than one list. And so we have 3 movies. Out of all the movies submitted, there was only 3 that appeared in all 5 lists. Only 3 films that all 5 of us had on our top 50 of the decade. Those 3 movies were Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, It Follows, and Mad Max Fury Road. Likewise, there was 5 movies that only appeared on 4 out of the 5 lists. Inception and The Nice Guys weren't put on Tim's list, The Cabin in the Woods and The Avengers weren't put in Connor's list, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was on everyone's list but Tara's. There were 16 movies that were on 3 out of the 5 lists. I won't read them all out, but they're all on the screen for you right now. The only one that I kind of want to point out is Under the Skin, which in this very episode I implied I remembered it being on 4 out of the 5 lists when I was talking about it in my entry. And that is because I remembered Tara putting it on her top 25 sci-fi of the decade list, so it didn't make her top 50 of the decade, but it did make her top 25 sci-fi of the decade, so it wasn't far off the top 50. But that's what I was thinking of, so if that gets like an extra little point for you, if you're looking at these sort of stats as what to take as recommendations based on how many people vote for certain things, Under the Skin gets that little additional merit there. But that was the movies that were on 3 lists. Now, there was a lot of movies on 2 lists out of 5, right? Obviously, there was a lot of those. And originally, I wasn't planning on actually telling you what those were, and I won't actually read them all out. But I did actually take the time to check who had what pairings, like how many pairs of people had, the most shared movies that only those 2 people had. So I can tell you that myself and Tim had the most shared movies in terms of it was just us 2 that voted for them, with 7. And what's not surprising about this is that they're pretty much all horror movies, with the exception of I Saw the Devil, which is more of a thriller. They're all horror movies. So I think that's pretty funny that me and Tim actually racked up the most. And then there's a tie. Me and Tara have 5 shared movies, which, again, amusingly, 4 of them are science fiction films, which makes sense, again, because we do a science fiction movie show together, the Atomic Cinema Experiment, which is our sci-fi movie podcast. Me and Tim do, of course, Screams After Midnight, the horror movie podcast. So it makes sense that a lot of our shared movies are actually of the genre of show that we do together. Then, surprisingly, Connor and Tara also have 5 shared movies, but there is a caveat to one of them in more than one way. If you look at Jojo Rabbit there in the middle, one is just that if I had seen this before I'd done my list, I would have had it on mine, so it wouldn't be a twofer, it'd be a triple. in the previous list. The reason why it's slightly controversial is that Connor actually hadn't seen it when he started doing the top 50. He swapped it in halfway through because we recorded some of ours a little bit later and decided to take something else out and put this in. So I think that's a little bit shady, but regardless, the list as it's published does have 5 shared between Connor and Tara. And then there's no 4s, but there's a bunch of 3s. Myself and Connor share 3 movies. Matt and Tara share 3 movies. Very varied mix of 3 movies there as well. No real kind of trend between them. We've got a comic book movie, an animated movie, and Gone Girl, which is like one of the darkest thrillers of the decade. Connor and Tim also share 3 movies. And then there's a bunch of 2s. Matt and Connor share 2, both by the same director, funnily enough. Matt and Tim share 2. Tim and Tara share 2. And then myself and Matt only share 1, and that is Happy Death Day. But yeah, so I thought that was quite interesting to see just kind of who kind of paired up the most after you take out all the ones that everyone voted for, essentially. So that was that. And then I'm not going to list them or tell you what they are. I'll just tell you that there's 102 films that were unique to one list. Out of the 158, 102 were only put on one list each. That's pretty interesting. So there's a lot of variation amongst the lists. So as much as there was some overlap, over 100 of those movies were individual and only picked by one person. So that is pretty cool. One of the other things that I did when I put all this information together is I actually gave the movies some points based on where they placed on each other's list. Now, I could have, gave you a whole top 50 based on those points, but I didn't think it was worth it. With only 5 people in the pool, it's not actually varied enough to go beyond a certain amount. But what I thought would be interesting is to give you the top 10. It's kind of what you expect based on what I just told you. Number 1 is Dawn of Planet of the Apes, and then It Follows and Mad Max Fury Road. In that order, that's in the order of the points they got. We mentioned those had 5 votes each. All 3 of those were on all 5 lists. So you'd expect that right after that, it'd be movies that had 4 lists, right? And that's true to begin with. We have Inception at number 4, The Nice Guys at number 5, Cabin in the Woods at number 6. But we actually don't have all of the 4s in the top 10, which makes sense when you think about it, because some of these movies that were on 4 lists might have all appeared a little bit lower in the list. So some films that only got 3 lists actually got more points because the people who did put them on their list placed them much higher. So Drive's actually number 7, Get Out's at number 8, Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl are at number 9. And interestingly, we actually have a movie that only had 2 entries in the top 10. Just squeaking in there is Parasite, and there's no doubt in my mind that if myself and Matt and Tara had seen Parasite before we did our top 50s, that Parasite would likely be much higher on these lists and much higher on these stats, because Connor and Tim both put it on their lists relatively highly, and since recording these top 50s, myself, Tara, and Matt have all seen the movie and have all praised it to varying degrees. So I feel like Parasite would be the one that's much higher. But it's interesting that even with only 2 people, singing its praises, it got enough points to be on that top 10. So that's very interesting. There you go. That's kind of the movies that were shared and also what they got in terms of a sort of combined top 10. But there is a little bit more to tell you, because I like stats and I went a little bit nuts here. I can actually tell you the breakdown of the genres. This is based on all 158 movies across all 5 lists. I can tell you that 20%, the winning genre, as it were, with 20% of those 158 movies was horror. And that's kind of interesting. I think that it's skewed a little bit. I think it's interesting that we have myself and Tim, who are both on a horror movie podcast, and then enough of the others like horror that obviously it skews it. And then we have science fiction at 18%, taking the number 2 slot. Again, there's a dedicated sci-fi movie podcast. So me and Tara likely skewing that up a little bit. Although sci-fi is pretty well represented amongst everyone, which you'll see in a second. Thriller comes in at number 3 with 13%. Drama and comedy are tied at 11%. 5 is comic book and family, tied with 8%. Action and musicals are tied at 3%. Documentary has 2%. And then war, western, and fantasy all have 1%. As a tie. Now, it's worth mentioning the program I was using to do these percentages was rounding it to whole numbers. It's entirely possible if we were getting decimal places that we'd have something a bit more accurate and those ties would all be split up. But that is what it looks like right now. And I won't necessarily go into all of these individual figures on their own, but I did work out the percentages for each person's list based on their genres, just to sort of just see how it shaped out and how sort of different some of them were. It's worth mentioning, I had my number one genre was horror with 32%. And Matt's number one genre was drama with 18%. Matt's a lot more spread out. I mean, horror and sci-fi definitely dominated my percentages. Matt was a lot more, he's got a lot kind of in the double digits. Well, I mean, you can't go higher than double digits, but, like I have 3 in double digits, and then I immediately go down to single digits and, have really low percentages for the bottom half of that list. Whereas Matt, very spread out. Even though he has a couple of small percentages at the end, he has a lot of stuff in the teens and or just over 10. Connor, interestingly, is kind of unique amongst us in that he only had 4% of his list be horror films, which is far lower than everyone else. Tim actually has the highest percentage of any genre in that 44% of his list, almost half, was horror movies. That is more than anyone else. Looking at the other sort of winners, obviously my second place was sci-fi, but Connor's number one was sci-fi, just a bit more than me with 26% versus my 24%. Tara took the win though with that, with 30% of her list being sci-fi, and again, she's on a sci-fi movie podcast, it kind of makes sense. But notably, Tim's second place was still sci-fi with 18%. Horror for Tara was a little bit more kind of in the middle. That said though, a lot of her figures were very evenly spread after that number one slot, so it's kind of in that pool of the sort of tied for second and third place. Just kind of interesting stats. Maybe this is all boring to you guys, but I think it's kind of interesting just to look at those and see how it shaped out amongst different people. And the other thing that I did, the other stat that I looked at that I really wanted to kind of check out was how it broke down into the years. So again, looking at the breakdown of all 158 movies, 2010 had 7% of the total. 2011 had 6%, 2012 had 8%, as did 2013, 2014 had 13%, 2015 had 14%, so we're inching up the way, and the winner actually of the years is 2016. 2016 had 16% of the total movies submitted, and then we sort of jump back down to 11% with 2017, and then 9% for 2018, and just 8% for 2019. I actually have to admit, I'm kind of surprised that 2019 was as high as it was, because some of us, when we look at the individual breakdown in a second, some of us had almost nothing from 2019. So it's actually surprising that 2019 is as high as it is. I think Connor, almost on his own, sort of dragged that up a little bit. Actually, no, that's a lie. Tim dragged it up. Connor kind of helped a little bit. Tim... So if we look at the individual ones, what's really interesting about this is that Tim, in this very episode, said that he might have some recency bias, and he's actually kind of right, because he's the only one that has 2019 as his winning year. 18% of his picks were from 2019, and that is kind of high, especially when the rest of us, like, I only have one movie from 2019. I have 2% of my picks from 2019. Matt's the same. Matt only has 2% from 2019. I think that, like, me and Matt at the very least kind of veered away from 2019. I think Tara's only at 6% for 2019. So most of us actually have the opposite of recency bias. Most of us actually are tougher on the recent years, seemingly. But again, there is the caveat of, like, none of the three that I'm talking about, me, Matt, and Tara, hadn't seen Parasite yet. 1917 hadn't come out yet by the time we'd done these lists. So there's definitely some caveats there as to why 2019 should maybe be a little bit higher. But, having said that, some of the movies I hadn't seen, at least, Tara had definitely seen Jojo Rabbit, so that would still be there and accounted for. As for other interesting details, looking at these numbers, which I realise might be the most boring, Tara's the only person out of all 5 to have a year at 0. Tara has no movies from 2011, which is very interesting. She only has 2%, and one movie that is from 2010, which also is very much against everyone else who has, at least a couple from 2010. I'll just sort of tell you, what each person's top year, essentially. My top year was 2015 with 16%, but that's not that much higher than the, a couple of 14%, so fairly evenly spread, barring the last year, which is dramatically lower. Matt has 2016 at 20%, so he has 20% is quite high for, given that you've got 10 years to work from, and is significantly higher than his next highest with 14% of 2014. Connor, very evenly spread, as I said. The highest he gets to is 16%, much like myself, and that was 2014 for him, as opposed to my 2016. But again, not much higher than his next highest. Tim is, again, like I said earlier, his highest year is 2019 at 18%, which is very surprising. And then after that, he's got a couple at 14. So yeah, he's actually weighed to the newest year, which is really strange. Tara, I think Tara wins the highest percentage, actually. Tara has 2015 at 24%. The next after that was Matt at 20% for one of his years. So Tara's actually the one who loves the single year the most. There's a single year for Tara that is the higher than anyone else's year, based on these top 50s. So that's pretty interesting. She also has 2014 at 18%, which is still quite high. For that to be her second place is very high. So the fact that her 2011 and 10 and 2019 are all pretty low is where that is being made up, essentially. So that's how the years broke down between us. And then the final thing that I thought I'd look at, not too in-depthly, admittedly, because it's not as interesting given it's such a relatively speaking, a tight span of time, but I did look at the directors. There's a bunch of directors who had 2 movies spread out over the people, but I thought I'd point out the ones that either had 3 movies or 4 movies represented in the 158 movies that were submitted. The 3 movies, there's 4 people sharing that honour. There's Edgar Wright, the Russo brothers. Obviously, they get a little bit of an easy, and as long as someone put in those Avenger movies and Winter Soldier, they get their name on there. Denis Villeneuve had 3 movies in here. Quentin Tarantino had 3 movies in there. Notably, I think that was all Tarantino made this decade, so all of his movies are in there, whereas Villeneuve had another couple that didn't quite make it, but he did get 3 in there. There's 2 people with 4 movies, and certainly in one of these cases, it's every movie that director made. That's Christopher Nolan. So we're looking at what there: Interstellar, Inception, Dunkirk. So you can thank Tara for the Dunkirk, because no one else was putting Dunkirk in there. And you can also, obviously, have Dark Knight Rises, which a couple of us had. So that's Nolan's 4 movies that are represented. And Taika Waititi actually has 4 in here. I'm not sure if it's everything he did in the decade. It must be most of what he did in the decade, if not. But Thor Ragnarok, What We Do in the Shadows, Hunt for the Wilder People, and Jojo Rabbit, as we were talking about earlier. So, yeah, Taika Waititi, one to look out for. He is rising through the ranks here, apparently, as far as Mild Fuzz TV are concerned. So that's all the stats that I wanted to share. I thought it was worth looking at these lists and getting some information out of them. So thank you very much for joining me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this series. I definitely don't want to do one of these right away again, because this was a lot of work, and it was basically this editing backlog to constantly be working on over the last 2 months, which did take a lot of time away from doing other things and trying maybe some new things or keeping up with certain reviews that may have fallen behind. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully if you want to see more of this stuff, this kind of thing where we edit together like a bunch of different people's lists, hopefully you enjoy that. It is worth mentioning that coming later in March will be the top 10s of 2019. So as much as some movies maybe got left out of the top 50 of the decade because we had to get them done earlier, you will see some movies represented in our top 10s of 2019. At least 3 of us will be doing that, maybe 4. So, you can look forward to that later in the month. But that has been our top 50 movies of the decade, top 50 movies of the decade, that being the 2010s. So thank you very much for joining us on this series. Hopefully you enjoyed the ride. You can, of course, let us know and share your list, your top 50s of the decade, in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. You can get us on the Twitters at Mild_Fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show, obviously you can do all those things. You can also get us on patreon.com/MildFuzzTV. Thank you very much to our patrons. You get bonuses, of course, at just $1 a month. You get voting rights and other bonuses at $5 a month. And then, of course, there's the higher tiers. So I'll thank our patron producers. I'm not sure if I've been doing that at the end of these episodes, but I think it's worth doing this last one. Thank our patron producers for the month. So thank you to David Shaw, Alison M. Fordyce, Sandy Palacios, Tyler Hess, and Talking Superman for being patron producers for the month of March. It is a great help for all our producers. So let me thank everyone kind of extra special here at the end of this series. This has been a lot of work, but I think it has, been a worthwhile effort. Is it as perfect as I was hoping it would be? I don't know. I think there's improvements to make in future series like this. Something that I'll look into stuff that I've maybe learned from doing it this way. But hopefully you guys have had fun. So yes, thank you once again for watching. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, guys. And if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.